place in town where you won't get that in the city, kid. But it goes to rebar and everything.
Does it fuck?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Especially for it.
How much was it?
$12.95.
Go away.
Yeah.
Those you probably use them with one
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
But for $12.25.
It's actually, it's just worth it.
But the change in quality of job that makes for your brain.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
There's actually nothing worse than using a blood mason and you're you're hanging off the wall.
But also it's like destroys the drill.
Yeah.
You end up going skew-ways with one of the holes and then you're fucking concrete angle. Do you know?
Yeah. Oh, there's nothing worse than it. Yeah, going at an angle.
No.
But the problem is when you have a good bit, you just absolutely tear through.
Oh, yeah.
The masonry.
Oh, God, yeah.
Questions and answers. Squat winner. Oh, goodness, there's people here.
Goodness gracious. Are we live already?
I actually think we are live.
Holy moly.
My laptop's covering me, and it's very rude. Oh, it's very rude. Do you want to... Oh, no. Happy Christmas, guys. Oh, happy Christmas, Evan.
Happy Christmas, Evan. I hope you bought that Tika that you were talking about.
Yeah, how's the Tika going?
I also hope you bought that book on accurizing Tikas by Nathan Foster.
There's zero chance you bought that.
I'm just going to estimate a 0% chance of that ever happening.
What's your body weight?
96.
96.
Just nearly too lean now at this point, you know.
I'm trying to see 100 before Christmas, but my body is not wanted.
Also, trying to do that around Christmas time is not.
But it's grand at the moment because there's nothing in the house. But there's I've like 3 Christmas dinners to do.
Yes.
So I need to.
We've had boxes of chocolates now flat out for the last 2 weeks.
Can't have them. Can't have them in the house.
They can't exist within reach.
No. But the problem is the big thing when you start, if you track calories diligently, is you think about the average person or even someone who's just not tracking calories is so like staying kind of fat is so easy because the few things that can take you over, like the difference between being 250 calories over every day or 3 or 4 times a week and not, like it's just a no-brainer to count them. I get why people are like lose weight without tracking, but ultimately it's like you're opting for the worst scenario there.
I think as well, considering how big of an impact being over by 300 or 400 calories is, and then the fact that nearly every snack is 500 calories.
But even if you, that's the problem. Like, but even if you don't track and you standardize everything, you're still technically tracking that way. So you might as well know. Like, I don't. To be honest with you, I have no pity for you if you're resistant to the idea of just putting a few numbers into an app. I've no.
ChatGPT.
But I've no.
Yeah.
There's loads of great apps. Of all things, do you know if someone is like, you have to do fasted cardio every day? I'm like, okay, you don't need to do that to lose weight. But I do not have sympathy for someone who's just refusing, who's under the age of 65 and is refusing to just.
Yeah, who owns a smartphone?
Update something every day.
Yeah.
I just have no pity for that. I just have no, it doesn't.
What I think as well is it's like trying to stay under the speed limit without a speedometer in your car.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, I've driven forever. I understand what the speed feels like.
Yeah.
Or else you just look at the speedometer.
Oh, you just don't want to lose weight, so.
Yeah.
You just don't want to lose weight. That's it. Like, I don't.
You just want to stay like this forever, is it?
Think about now. Being a nutrition coach would drive me up the walls.
Yeah.
It's so funny when athletes are like, oh, I need to lose weight or be less fat. And I'm like, cool, can you help? And like, I can help a little bit. Send me a week of your food. And you just never hear back.
Oh, no, the big thing is, just write down everything you eat for 3 days.
Yeah.
And you'll never get it.
What's funnier is when they lie to you. You know, when they send you back and it's a lie. You're like, oh, this is 1,800 calories. So, are we still lying to each other? Here? What are we doing here, guys?
A friend of mine, you would have known him, Shane Kingston.
I remember.
He used to do the nutrition in the gym. But I remember specifically a client, and there was definitely lying going on. And he was like, you have to take a picture of everything you eat.
Oh, that's.
And then suddenly all the oatmeal and the fruit and everything, there was no pictures of that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, or the small bowl of porridge didn't ever exist.
I will say I have many character flaws, but binge eating and just not eating things I'm not supposed to isn't one of them.
Right.
Like, I have tons of other flaws, but that one, that's what I never really had a massive issue with, to be honest. No, I like a good snack, obviously.
Today's live stream as well, just so you know, I know it's in the title of this, but it is announcing the squat challenge winner.
Yeah, we'll wait till a few more people get here. The winner knows he's won already, but the runner-up doesn't know he's runner-up.
I will say as well, competition was strong.
Yeah, well, you can see the compilation on the Seek Strength Clips channel.
Yeah, some of the nice big PBs.
Not that strong, said Mary Kreiser, fellas. Any update on when the 3-day weightlifting will be coming out, or can the in-app coaching have be modified the existing weightlifting program's 3-day program? So update on 3-day weightlifting will be realistically 2 or 3 months from here. There's a couple of programs that need to be released first, and there's some big updates coming in January and in February. So video feedback is coming in January with a price increase on the app. And then in February, we will have several other changes to the UX that will be made. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to release a lot of programs at once. So there's too many programs to do for the year that we actually don't even have enough months to do one at a time. And we just want to put them out there. So I'm literally looking at a board on the wall of programs that need to be done. And we're just going to group them together because we're going to restructure a bit on how you find your training program. So it's more clear and obvious, clear and present danger of your program. Now, that said, if you want to run a program 3 days a week, all you have to do, and people have been doing this since day 0, 8 years ago, is you just run 3 days a week, and then day 4 is at the start of the next calendar week. So 1, 2, 3 on week 1. Week 2 is 4, 1, 2, and you just keep doing that. Works incredibly well. It's still enough frequency that you're getting good stimulus going on. You can do this with pretty much any of the programs. There will be a 3-day weightlifting week program. There'll also be a 3-day strength program, which is actually done, which is nice.
There's a nice green tick next to that on the list of programs.
I like on a physical list.
Yes.
Sometimes nice.
All about the whiteboard and blackboards.
But yes, you can do the existing weightlifting program 3 days a week. It works perfectly well.
Mm-hmm. And as well, for any of those kind of program modifications, do just message us in the chat. It's the best way of doing it. It's the easiest way. You get really nice feedback and we can kind of chat over and back a little bit rather than just giving a blanket recommendation, because a lot of the time the allocations or the changes that you might need to make in certain areas do just depend on your own particular situation. So don't be afraid to press that coach button when you're in the app.
The tarp says you're fading away.
Evan Lee says his money and focus is on healing his L5S1. I hope your back is all right.
Do you know what I really like is people finally coming to the realization that surgery is probably the least useful fix for tons of things, like back injuries, the hip lyroscopy thing they do, you know, that grows.
Yeah.
I actually don't think they do those anymore because they were so unsuccessful in the short and long term. And they couldn't even see any actual changes a couple of years post on any of the scans. Now, that's not to say certain surgeries aren't incredibly useful. Like you see very successful meniscus tear repairs with the keyhole surgery. I've seen that work a lot really well. So I think people become a bit more selective with being recommended surgery and taking up on the offer where you could probably fix a lot more things
100%
before you go that way.
Yeah.
To be honest, actually, in some of the cases, it just is going to make it worse.
Yeah. There's certain things you're just going to need surgery for, and you should just get the surgery as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things, and it's hard as well because most of the time you get these injuries, if you're an athlete, you haven't experienced it before. You might have some people around you who've had similar injuries, and there's a general kind of sense of let's see how this kind of pans out, or let's just give it a little bit of time. But there are certain things you just need to go and get it done as quickly as possible, as soon as possible. There is, I like the fact that in knee injuries now, they tend to do a kind of 2 to 3 month prep phase beforehand to build up around a bit of structure around the knee. But besides that, I think people just going in and getting it done. When you've made the decision that you're going to need it, just get it done as quickly as you can.
I actually agree with Stuart McGill, which is a controversial thing to say in the industry. And actually, he said something on Peter Attia's podcast where he was saying like deadlifting and stuff is really dangerous, which I didn't agree with. But one of the things I do like about what he said was when you're rehabbing for a back injury or you might have to get surgery, in the meantime, just treat today like day 0 of back rehab and then go through the whole process. And I think a lot of people will be surprised how much further along they'd get before they got the surgery. Now, again, Stuart McGill, controversial figure and probably deservedly so, but
he's also thought a lot about back injuries and strength training.
Yeah, he's definitely. I haven't kept up with a lot of stuff. I listened to one of the things he was on Peter Tia's podcast, and he was talking about how dangerous deadlifts are, and he was kind of saying you can either hit PBs or play with your grandkids, which I thought was incredibly stupid, and a ton of people did as well.
What?
So yeah. Anyway, moving
Oh,
on.
that's
Red Banana said Happy Christmas,
Bread Banana regularly changes his username kind of handle, doesn't he?
but never the thumbnail.
No. Then Aqua Hero says, do you have any programs for older lifters, 50 plus in brackets? So we don't have any specific masters programs on the app right now. Now, what we do is we help people structure the standard programs, help them make some minor adjustments that allow them to be run kind of a bit more easily or a bit more acceptably for the masters lifters. Generally speaking, what happens with the masters lifters is they go for slightly less frequency. So rather than it being 4 days per week of weightlifting, they'll go to 3 days per week of weightlifting. And then we basically look at where the deficits lie. So with masters athletes, some people are coming in with a phenomenal level of sporting experience. They have really high GPP, and they can then transition into a sport like weightlifting or into some hybrid training quite well. In other masters groups, you're coming in with very low level of kind of athleticism, or maybe they haven't trained in years. And so with that 3 days per week of weightlifting or something along those lines, we'll recommend some work on the erg. We'll recommend some general physical preparedness work to kind of help them bring up that overall level of athleticism. So there's definitely a lot you can do there, but we will have some masters programs next year.
Swiss Keys said, I did well on RTA week 4 day 2 and hit 886. Great job. But a full week later, my legs are shot and I can barely hit a triple. So I can't get near week 5, day 1. Should I rest longer or go back to early in the program? Don't go back in the program. What you do is just take a pretty easy week if it took that much out of you. So just week 5, but half the load, keep the sets and reps the same, and then attend week 5 later. And your legs should be recovered by then. If they're not, that would be very surprising. So I think you should be okay. So just do week 5, half the load on everything. Super easy week. Obviously, that's a massive progress to 8, 8, and 6 with the squat program. Your strength won't go anywhere. It's only a week of lighter squats. Then attempt week 5, day 1. If that doesn't work, reach out to us and we'll make sure you're sorted.
It's an interesting thing. A lot of the time, people are worried about having to take a step back, or they're worried about those days off. That idea of just doing the next week at minus 25% or minus 30% is a really nice way of bringing yourself back into training. Because obviously, in a lot of the training programs, there are these big inflection points. There are these major challenge points throughout the blocks where we really want you to kind of blow your old numbers out of the water. Week 4, day 2 on Road to Anywhere 1 is a classic example of that, where it's 3 sets of 8 at 93% or something along those lines, depending which stream you're in. And so after that, you might need the 4 or 5 days of rest. You will be very sore, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's certainly not a bad thing to do those lighter sessions just for the week afterwards. Swisskies says happy Xmas.
Wait, no, hang on. Oh, yeah,
Sam says, should front squat be programmed differently to the back squat? Yes. The major difference between the front squat and the back squat is how sensitive to volume you're going to be. So when we imagine the back squat, and we're team high bar back squat over here, we're all about it. Everybody who trains under us will be back squatting realistically for most of their training blocks. When we look at the front squat, we're just supporting it with slightly less structure. So the bar is slightly in a less advantageous position. We have to use a bit more core musculature to secure the barbell. It's a bit more anteriorly focused, so our legs are doing a lot more work rather than our legs and our posterior chain. And so we just can't handle the same amount of volume there. In most cases, where we would be starting off back squat cycles with 10s and 12s for a lot of our high volume pieces, in the front squat, we're just not going to be able to handle as much volume. You'll end up degrading your positions far faster. We'll have this regression to a secondary position where we lose the upper back structure, or we start really shooting our hips back and struggling to secure the barbell on the front rack. And so when we start getting into the initial phases of accumulating some volume, building up that general preparedness to then go into the squat block itself, we can't do it with 10s, we can't do it with 12s. And that's why if you look at our squat program, the initial weeks look far more different than the later weeks do.
One thing to note as well when you're programming front squats is they're much more technically punishing at heavier weights. So they do require more near maximal attempts, 10, 20% extra compared to a back squat. For the most part, a back squat at 80% and 90%, very, very similar feeling when you're fresh as opposed to 100 or 105%. There's very little difference once you're reasonably well trained. The problem with a front squat is that every degree of positional change, which gets worse, is going to cost you a lot more on the weights in your front squat. So let's say we put an imaginary number of 5% deviation on positions in a back squat. You can probably tolerate 10, 15, 20 kilos more maybe in some scenarios. However, in a front squat, a deviation of just a few percentages of technique at really maximal weights and you're pretty strong could cost you several kilos. Like you could go up 5 kilos, and if you're just out of position, there's no way you can kind of grind through it, because most part, once you get pretty well trained on front squats, it's either it's probably there or it's not there. Like unless you're an absolute monster, you're a massive strongman or you're a super heavyweight in weightlifting, for most people, grinding out front squats when they're near a well-trained state is very, very difficult. And you want technique that's reproducible, and that's something that's consistent that you can use again in the future. And so it makes sense to prioritize the technique of the front squat because it'll take you further along. So maybe now if you're 2 years into training, you can grind out an absolutely disgusting 120 kilo front squat, for example, you're better off having better quality technique and letting it go a little bit, because the front squat will punish you more for more technical deviations that the back squat wouldn't, aka front squat, you need better technique to hit more weights, and it gets more punishing as you get heavier. So you just need some more attempts periodically throughout the program in most cases to make sure that the technique you're using is a good technique for heavy weights.
Failure on front squat is Boolean. It's yes or no.
It's Boolean. What is that?
Is it a Boolean variable is like on or off or whatever?
There's a really good video on that, Boolean statistics, before on YouTube. That was, when people used to make videos like that on YouTube, it was just really lecture heavy. Like you'd listen to a 2-hour talk and stuff.
Yeah.
Where's that gone?
I think it still exists.
I haven't seen it in my algorithm for a
while. Know why? I bet why it is the standard of production on YouTube has gotten way higher now. And so people feel like they can't get away with just putting up the lecture.
Yeah.
The video has to have a bit more going on. Like those, the Fern documentary style videos on YouTube.
Yes.
Like that's probably what those videos are now. They just have really good graphics going over the top of them.
But I think there's something different going on in terms of your intake if there's too much of that happening.
Evan Lee?
No.
Connor
Cross? Hey, which of your programs would you recommend for a field sports athlete to focus on lower strength and core and a very small emphasis on uppers? I would do Road Linear Part 2 plus upper body armor on the Seek Strength app. You can run the two of them. Price of your subscription, get access to us on the app. You can message us pretty much anytime. We'll get back to you Monday to Friday. Upper body armor, Road to your Part 2 squat program. This would be simply perfect for what you're looking for. This is absolutely, I cannot think of a better way of showing this unless you just do the programs and in 3 months you're like, wow, that was perfect.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that you just have to go and do it for the 3 months.
You have to do
because you can give the prescription and it's going to work, but unfortunately you as the athlete have to go and do it.
I wasn't showing the little silly, sorry.
No.
So Evan said he did a 4-week course at BPC. I don't know if it was just a placebo, but I feel like it got me through the toughest parts fairly quickly, just waiting for my teeth to fall out or something. I genuinely think peptides are the next step in medicine for a lot of people. I'll be very interested to see what they look like in 10 or 20 years time, what iterations there is. Even if you look at like those basically appetite suppressants, like Ozempic and tirzepatide and all that, but then you've got retatrutide, which isn't even on the market yet, I think, but there's tons of people using it. I remember I used to work for a company that made one of them, and this was in 2000 and I think probably 18. Results came out, the initial trials on one of those, and it was like 20% body loss in 8 weeks, or body mass loss in like 8 weeks in the participants. And I immediately said, I was like, I guarantee you bodybuilders and physique people are going to be using this. It's not just diabetics. And lo and behold, it's
here we are.
So it's very, very interesting where that's going. I think you'd make a ton of money if you could sell them legally, but
yeah. TJ's about to go and squat.
TJ, my private chef. Is he private? No, is he a chef? No, he's not private. Yeah, owns a
restaurant. Is TJ one of your one-to-one athletes?
Yeah, he chef in, not my private chef. We're not, there's not that many app users.
That's
yet.
it.
No, he's a chef in one of the estates in Scotland.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but he's going squatting. A lot of volume.
If ever you need some of those deer culled, TJ.
Unfortunately, his bench and his squat are very similar. So,
Oh, yes.
So it needs to be no surgery for Evan.
Nice.
Bread banana
says, question regarding jumping and triple jumping.
Read it again now.
Jumping and triple extension.
Clear, enunciate now because this might be a clip.
I'll bring it closer so my eyes can see it. Banana Bread asks, question regarding jumping and triple extension. Is it an error to have hang time after jumping into full extension at lower weights? Resolve this on its own, question mark. Hard not to cut extension short to reduce hang time to match higher weights. So this is a very common question when we look at the use of Olympic lifts and their transition over into sports or general athleticism. If you looked at any strength and conditioning texts in the last 40 or 50 years, the use of something like a power clean or a hang clean or any of the weightlifting derivatives would always be attributed to jump performance through training of the triple extension and increased power production. So what are we doing? We're basically pulling a barbell off the floor at the top of our pull as the barbell is making contact with the quads. I'm extending through my ankles, my knees, and my hips. Basically, through training that, I'm then going to become a stronger or a higher jumper because of it. The problem is, in weightlifting, that full triple extension is not something we're commonly going to train, and it's almost never going to be something we'll commonly cue or give athletes to try and get them to hit that as best they possibly can. The reason for that is it ends up bringing in or introducing an error of over pulling the barbell. So this is what you're talking about here. There's a bit of hang time. Essentially, you extend very aggressively at the top. In this case, you're talking about it being a lighter weight. So you have this hang time where the trajectory of the barbell is slightly too high. You end up catching the barbell in a higher position, i.e. a muscle snatch, power clean, or you're going to wait a couple of seconds before you pull underneath the barbell. If you were just using those weightlifting movements to get the best out of your jumping performance and you're determined to use them to do that, then you should just be focusing on pulling that barbell as quickly and as aggressively as possible. There are some good kind of follow-on advantages to the Olympic lifts, like catching the barbell, going from that maximum contraction to maximum relaxation to maximum contraction again. So that is the pulling, getting underneath, and then catching the barbell. But when we're really looking at it from a triple extension point of view, you should just be pulling that barbell nice and high, catching it in a strong power position, and not worrying about that lag underneath. There is an adjunct to this, or a PS afterwards. If you want to get better at weightlifting, this isn't the way you do it. So you have to be very clear on what you're using the movement to do. Am I doing power cleans to get a bigger vertical jump, or am I using power cleans and cleans to get better at the movement themselves? And those two things are going to be cued in two very, very different ways.
Cameron said, hey, gents, just finished weightlifting one yesterday. 5 kilos on your snatch, clean and jerk, and back squat, and 10 kilos on my front squat. Great work.
Phenomenal work.
Cameron, if you want to leave a little app review, that'd be stunning. No pressure, though. Stop fear-mongering the use of straps during cleans, you accent-heavy fools.
So
you can't, first of all, you can't call someone an accent heavy because everybody has an accent. You're implying a consistent constraint everyone has. So you just look silly, no.
And nobody's fortunate to watch these videos.
But also, we should be fear-mongering the use of cleans because most people are nowhere near skillful enough to use straps and cleans. And I don't even think we've said it recently.
No.
But I'd still stand by it.
I know 2 people who've had double wrist breaks. One of them was self-employed. She had to move in with the owner of the gym because she had just started her own business, which was very hands-heavy business. Couldn't pay her own rent, couldn't work for months, and had a double wrist break because she tried to do a double on a clean at a near maximal weight with straps on. That's why I'll continue to fearmonger the use of straps and cleans. If you're 150 kilos and you're a thrower and you're smashing 170 kilo hang power clean triples, go ahead and use them. You're already gone beyond the point of needing to be concerned about it. If you're not in that case, and if you're not an elite athlete, you should not be using straps for your cleans.
No, there's definitely no need. Why would you need them realistically if you're weightlifting? The Tarp said, where can a man buy a 3-meter tall shed for home gymming? Search engines refuse to pay ball and show me any results. Do you think search engines have gotten a lot worse? I feel like the YouTube search engine has gotten worse. I feel like Google just shows you
Yeah.
mostly sponsored things now.
Yeah. It's so algorithm heavy.
I actually don't know, Taps. We're building a studio at the moment, but
Mm.
Dara's building it basically. So
Yeah. Just buy the steel and a welder.
where are we going? Oh, this
Tarp
one.
says also happy Christmas.
Oh, happy Christmas to you too. Okay, in 5 minutes we'll get to the winner of the squat program, the runner-up. Yo, guy with the glasses, what are your injuries?
My injuries are fairly prolific. The main injuries I had that stopped me playing rugby were a massive amount of concussions, so around 12 or 15 concussions.
I think they mean what's stopping you training a lot now.
Oh, stopped me training right now is a sore back from renovating a house. And I've also developed this RSI thing in my right arm, but that's not really what's holding me back. It's mainly just my back is banjaxed. And the problem with my back is it's connected to my brain, which is why it's injured.
And you had rhabdo,
Oh, and I had rhabdo.
which wasn't great.
No. Turkish?
Yeah.
Turkish says, I've been training my strict press, but tend to avoid bench press in my home gym over the holidays. Tend to avoid it. Oh, yeah. Is there any good reason to do seated overhead press on upright bench? Will it help my overhead press?
So when it comes to the strict press, obviously, so if the strict press is your main goal, the bench press is useful in this kind of related assistance way. So the strict press doesn't really help the bench press all that much once you get beyond a certain level of proficiency for bench pressing. Bench press will help your strict press a little bit if the upper body mass or general strength in that sense is lacking. So if you're someone who goes from a 120 bench to 160 kilo bench, your triceps, your pecs, your shoulders are all going to be a lot stronger. So then your ability to overhead press is going to be increased. Now, is it going to be as specific if you did more specific work for the strict press while doing lots of strict press? No, the strict press is going to go better if you're doing more of that strict press. So adding in your seated overhead press on an upright bench, would it help your overhead press? Yes, to a certain degree, definitely. It's going to be far better than not doing any form of pressing, absolutely. And if you look at our first pressing program, you'll see there's tons of assistance exercises and people make big progress on their strict press purely because the specific areas like their triceps, like their delts are lacking and their shoulders are lacking in that strength. And then if you bring those up, you'll see that the strict press follows on with that. And then you see the second strict press program we have, there's a lot more strict press in it because if you've done the first one, you've probably brought up those general areas. And so as a result, then when you go strict pressing, then you have those problem areas brought up to a certain level. And so then when you want to go strict pressing, your ability will be able to just focus and not have any specific weaknesses for the strict press. So in your case, if you're looking to improve the overhead press, but I assume you can't press at home over the holidays, maybe the ceiling is too low or something like that, or you don't have a rack or whatever, seated overhead press would be perfectly fine. It would definitely be beneficial for your strict press, or rather, it'll definitely stop any reduction in your pressing abilities while you're home, if maybe it's a few weeks, if you're, for example, a student or something, or a month or so. So definitely it will help in the fact that it's just general strength training, general muscle building. If you're someone who's particularly weak in those areas, and if you're particularly lacking in certain parts of that, maybe your triceps are particularly weak in your press, or your shoulders are, for example, then this might be a useful way of getting some extra volume in there. Okay, so let's look at the squat challenge. So I'll show you the winner, and I think it's fair. I'm going to share the screen. I think the winner is one where we wanted it to be undoubtedly the winner. We didn't want someone to win where you're like, oh, they should have won. The winner had to be someone where it was like, oh, clearly that's the winner.
And this blew it out of the water.
I thought so too. So I'm gonna share my screen. So okay, everyone should see the screen. And let me just take off
the comment.
Like that. There we go. Right. Now, everyone should see. Let me change the layout to. This is the one bad thing about Riverside is this layout stuff. Okay, so everyone see the screen? Can you see in the chat what they're saying?
I can see the screen.
Perfect. Okay, so this is a smattering of PBs here.
Do you want to go full screen with that just so it's...
Oh, stunning. Yeah. Yes, stunning.
Gorgeous.
So these are just all the PBs. You can watch this on the strength channel. There's tons of PBs. I think it's like 98% of people hit a PB or progressed on the program. And these are all of them. So you can watch them all here. Men and women, everyone doing great. Between 15 to 25 kilos, kind of range PBs, a few smaller ones, a few bigger ones. This is a really nice one here.
Yeah.
193. Was 13 kilo PB, 159. Someone had a great comment actually on this clip video was saying that gymflation is real. Like this is what normal people who train with normal weights. But this is also the progress you can make when you do good programming.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone, and I get it when someone has an app, and I think it's something, you know, you see any celebrity as an app or any fitness trainer, it's like, oh, I brought out an app or whatever. They're trying to sell a program. But these all ran the program on the app. They all had access to it on the app. And then they reap the rewards. So it's what value do you put on kilos onto your lifts or onto your performance? Like it's not, we didn't start an app because it was like, this is the best business model, but it's a bad product. It's a better product. And that's obviously a good business model for us. But you get the rewards for it. These are people, this is just one example of people who have, you know, hit massive PBs onto it. It also shows well how much progress you can make when you get after something and you get after it in the right manner. But here's the winner. 248 kilos. It's an 18 kilo PB. Nick was wearing a belt underneath, but no knee sleeves, high bar.
And lads, this squat is absolutely insanely fast.
The best part about this is Nick is not well built for squatting. He's like Darren. He's got maybe an average torso, but his legs are much longer in relation.
Yeah.
And he absolutely nails this. So an 18 kilo PB to 248 kilos, high bar, full depth. Like, I know it looks fast, but he probably couldn't have had another 2 kilos. Maybe he could have. In a few weeks, he might be able to get like 250 or 260, or another run of the program, he could probably get the 260.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say this is the winner. I
absolutely
couldn't.
I think like we were quite open and transparent when we set up the challenge and when Gerf was emailing everyone and talking to them about what the winner is going to look like. We obviously wanted a big PB, so a noticeable large increase in 1 rep max number. But there's other factors that come into this as well. Obviously, the absolute number here, that's an incredibly heavy squat. Nearly 250 kilos. A very, very, very strong squat. You're in the top 1% of people who've ever strength trained if you're squatting 250 kilos. But then there's other things that come along with it as well, and definitely the style of squat there. So the speed the barbell is moving at, how nice his positions are throughout the entire squat. He stays super upright. He drives through that squat. All the things we talk about on an incredibly regular basis on the channel. Having the knees forward, keeping the legs engaged, keeping your torso in an upright position. He also personifies that thing we're talking about of not being exceptionally well built for squatting, but makes it work incredibly well. Like, I think anybody in any gym in the world would be incredibly proud of that squat, and it's just a great winner overall.
It also just happens to be the biggest squat, but that wasn't going to be the sole factor. So this is Knox. He's a runner-up. So this is 200 kilos. It was a 20 kilo PB, and he was 94 kilos when he did it. So this is a stupendous squat. He would have won it, I think, if it wasn't for the fact that Nick came out of nowhere and demolished the 248. So this is massive. Again,
huge.
Full depth, high bar squat. First 200 kilos, obviously, it's a big milestone. Look at that. There's probably 210 there if you really wanted to take it. But obviously, it's sensible to leave plenty in the tank. And if it's a 20 kilo progress, it's a no-brainer to kind of leave it there. So
that squat is just so well controlled as well for a first time hitting 200 kilos. It's a significant PB. And yet he is so controlled throughout the descent, which is a major, major thing. Like, that's just a really nice looking, repeatable squat. Gerf talked there about leaving something in the tank, about wanting to kind of make it a good PB and not something that you're worried you'll never be able to hit again. And I think that's a real sign of that, where that's super consistent. There's no degradation in positions, really controlled throughout the entire rep. I have every confidence that if he wanted to hit that again in the week, he'd be able to hit it.
Now, back to questions. Sorry for the cliche, but I'm currently in love with Fontaine's DC. Do you have any recommendations for other Irish rock bands? I've never listened to Fontaine's DC.
I've heard some of their songs. To be honest, rock isn't where my main music. I will say 2 Irish bands at the moment that I'm definitely listening to a lot of are Amble and Kingfisher.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Now, you certainly couldn't call those rock bands, but they have certain songs that might be in the rock category, all right?
Simon is in the gym testing week of horse one, just hit 435 pounds deadlift, a 30-pound PB, 165-pound overhead press, 10-pound PR. Well done, Simon. Great work.
It's nice to be finishing off the year with PBs like that.
Freaky D says, cheers. Happy Christmas, Freaky. Simplifying you, 205 kilo current low bar PB at 94 kilos. I want 250. But best weight, time frame, and accessories to get it. I also have anterior pelvic tilt, just any extra info. So the best way to get it is to run the Road to Near Squat programs. It's probably actually a great time for you to ask this question, is that you should definitely just run the squat programs on the Seek a Strength app. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, because I was thinking about this the other day, and it's definitely something that crops up over and over again, is setting outlandish goals. And I actually think it's pretty inhibitory towards your progress. So a goal that's relatable to, obviously, to a lot of people watching this would have been something like weightlifting performance, or a 300 kilo squat. Obviously, for most people, was something you probably would have thought that day one when I got in the gym, it was something like, I'm going to squat 300 kilos someday. But I actually think setting those outlandish goals is a problem. I do not think it's the best way to go about training, and I don't think Darrow does either. Your best bet is setting achievable goals. Now, you can have aspirations and you can have long-term desires, but when you set goals that are just far too outlandish for your current position, it's not saying to yourself that I can't hit these goals. It's not saying to yourself that you're never going to be able to hit them. It's just being reasonable with the work you need to do in the meantime. And there's only so much progress you can make. And obviously you can make some big PBs. Obviously, we just saw the video of everyone hitting big progress. But expecting to hit a 45 kilo PB is pretty large. It's probably too big. Now, for example, there is someone who's run the squat program and they went from 260 to 300 kilos low bar. So that's not outlandish to expect that it can happen. Rather, it is outlandish to expect that it could happen. But what I would say is, I actually find this is a bad attitude in coming into things if we set too big goals. Now, this isn't the biggest one. You know, if people ask us, you're squatting 120 now, and they'll say, I want to squat 250. How long will it take to get there, and how should I get it? And it's a reasonable question to ask, of course, because if you expect progress to be possible, why then is it not unreasonable to ask, how long might that squat take? A better way of framing this is chunking this goals into smaller, still tough goals, still goals that force you to push yourself, still goals that force you to actually get after something, for sure, because you get those big dopamine hits, obviously, and you want to push yourself further and you don't want to undershoot. But when we set these massive goals or these outlandish aspirations in the long term, what we end up doing is oftentimes skipping the work in the short term that needs to be done, or skipping the process that we should be doing before we get to those goals. We need to do each one of these segments as we go along. That's what ends up happening, because you start thinking, I need to compress this time frame and I need to rush through this because this is the goal that I want. And you think that this is going to be the feeling you get when you get to that goal. But in reality, you're actually oftentimes pushing this really far away from yourself because you're going to skip a lot of that work. So when I first started squatting, I think I could squat 120 or 130 for a couple of reps. So probably 140 goal. My first goal was 170. Next big goal after that was 200 kilos. But when I did 200 kilos for the first time, I wanted to squat 200 kilos for multiple reps. I hit that. Then the next goal was 220, then 230, 250, 270. And then actually you can see this. The first time I went for 300 kilos, I messed myself up because I was trying to skip the weights in between. I was trying to go too fast from 270 to 300. I went 270, 285, perfectly reasonable. But then instead of going 290 the first time I attempted 300, or going 292 and a half, I went 285 to 300. I missed 300 kilos, obviously. I went again a couple of weeks later. I hit 290, and then I missed 300 again. But it was a silly way of going about that training. And I tried to fit too much into one training block. What I should have done was, I should have said, this training block, I'm going to hit 270 to 285 and leave it there and reset. Let it sit for a while, come back, and then go 285 to 295 or 300 or something like that. That is how the process should have gone. But what you end up doing is overshooting too aggressively. And what you end up hitting then is something that's not a representation of what you could have done in the meantime. And ironically, you would get there faster if you chunk those goals down into smaller, more attainable things. I definitely see this a lot, especially with the rise of hybrid training as well, where you see people wanting a lot of different things. They want a better physique, they want a faster mile, they want a bigger squat, and they'll say things like, I want to do, not singling anyone out here, of course, I want to do a 18-minute 5K, but I want to squat 200 kilos. But they've never had a sub 25-minute 5K or squatted over 160. And they could be physically capable of hitting those goals for sure. They're definitely attainable for a certain percentage of people, but they just come into this training and they kind of vomit out what they want to get done rather than going, okay, why don't I try and get one of these or two of these a little bit faster? And you end up just completely doing all the wrong things. This happens in every area of life. Obviously, people do this in business, people do this in relationships and career, and there's no reason it would be different in strength training. But to answer your question, run the squat program. There's, again, you can see plenty of people made 20 or 25 kilo PBs there, and that'd be reasonable. At the start of this year, it's very possible you could hit 250 by the end of the year if you were getting after, especially with low bar, for sure. And the accessories and time frame to get it is just running one of our programs.
I want to just definitely agree with everything Gerf said there.
You should,
but Gerf's listened to so many of my psych talks now. He's even bringing up the smart goal setting structure. You say, I also have anterior pelvic tilt, just extra info. If the anterior pelvic tilt is something that you feel is necessary to mention, then it is something I will be addressing. So you're well on in your squat journey. You're squatting over 200 kilos. If the anterior pelvic tilt is extending your lower back to the point where it's negatively influencing your squat, firstly, it's better than posterior pelvic tilt, just to clear that up. But I would definitely be addressing that. It's not that you can't make progress with your squat. It's not like you can't address this as you're going through the training cycles that you're doing, but make sure you get that stuff sorted.
I will also say, just on the specifics of anterior pelvic tilt, is I don't think I've yet seen someone who actually had a problematic anterior pelvic tilt.
I think a lot of time core might be a little bit too weak, or you lose position there because you're going to lose position somewhere. But just make sure you're addressing it.
Will stronger quads help me sipping Red Bull on the live stream? Someone actually asked later in the stream, what is it? It's actually just Pepsi Max. That's pretty much what I drink.
Simon Fleischman.
Oh, I got this is a clip here. Everyone prepare yourself. We've got another clip here, right? Because this is really common.
If my back squat and deadlift are 100 pounds different, is that bad?
Not necessarily. So this isn't bad in the sense you're thinking where you're like, okay, I've messed up all this training. What can often happen here is that sometimes you're just much better at one of these lifts than the other. Now, typically I would give more leeway to someone whose deadlift is much further than their back squat. So you might find someone like Dara, for example, who just is very good at deadlifting without even training it properly or really getting after it. And they have this just build for deadlifting. They have this predisposition for being better at deadlifting. And so they'll think, okay, I'm deadlifting 230 kilos, but my back squat's only 180 kilos. But in reality here, you might be sufficiently strong enough at your current level of back squat. That might be a good representation of your training experience and genetics after, let's say, 4 years of training. You're currently at 180 squat and you started at 80 kilos. That's great progress. It could just so happen that your deadlift is something that you're really good at. And let's say it's 180 after 4 years on your back squat, but you're deadlifting 240 kilos. This could be very, very appropriate ratios between these two, because you could just be really well built for deadlifting. It could be just something that you get beyond any other lift, and it's totally fine. Where this issue would come in is usually what you should see is if the squat is much stronger than the deadlift, there's probably a couple of issues going on with the deadlift. So the other way around, it could be your squat is perfectly fine. Your squat increasing will probably push your deadlift up further. So if you were, say, 180, 230 like that, you squat 200 kilos, it's probably going to even push your deadlift up higher, which is perfectly fine. However, if you're someone, for example, who can squat 230 kilos, but you're barely deadlifting like 205 kilos, there's probably a couple of things going on in your deadlift that's causing an issue. Because at a bare minimum, for most people, your squat and deadlift should be pretty similar, unless you're sumo deadlifting and you're cheating, or you're incredibly well built for deadlifting. Most people should be quite similar. And then if you really got after it, the deadlift will probably push ahead in most scenarios for that squat. So if the deadlift is really far ahead of the back squat, probably fine. Now, really far, you know, if you're deadlifting 230 and you're back squatting 120 after 4 or 5 years, and you have a bit of an issue there and you need to get your finger out and start back squatting. And like we just showed there with someone like Nick, he's not well built for squatting, but he's high bar squatting 248 kilos without knee sleeves on full depth. He's built like Dara. It's not a good build for squatting. He's able to do that.
It's not a good thing.
It's not good. So in those scenarios, if it's really far apart, like 100 pounds, 45 kilos, not crazy. Not ratios I'd want for myself personally, but they could be a reasonable representation. Yours like 40 pounds, 50 pounds, so like 20 kilos, 30 kilos.
Mine's 20 kilos, yeah.
So it's not unreasonable to assume that. And even at the very start, sometimes you could be really good at deadlifting and bad at squatting. But if it's the other way around, if your squat is really far ahead of your deadlift, you need to pull the finger out and get deadlifting, because there's no real reason you shouldn't be able to at least match those and then probably push one a little bit further ahead.
In my brain, around 15% of a difference is an all right kind of ratio to sit in.
Yeah. Now, where are we?
Banana bread, question regarding transferability of shoulder stabilization. You on that?
Yeah.
Okay, Banana bread asks, question regarding transferability of shoulder stabilization. Bottoms up kettle presses are amazing. Thanks, lads. To reduce axial loading, is it okay to perform kettlebell bench press with expectation it transfers to weightlifting overhead movements? Thanks, lads. I'm only interested in weightlifting. Wish I discovered the sport earlier. When we look at something like stabilization, what's happening here is probably 2 or 3 things are happening. So let's take that kettlebell bottoms up overhead press. Grab a kettlebell by the handle, that kind of ball of the kettlebell sits above it, and I press it over my head. The load in that kettlebell is quite unstable. So then I have to do a lot of this stabilization work, which leads me to being more stable in the overhead position. To quickly answer your question, I will say no, the bench press will not do the same thing that the overhead movement will do, due to the fact that weightlifting is more overhead specific, and due to the fact that the shoulder is pinned against the bench when we're doing bench, and we don't have to stabilize it quite so much because we have that kinesthetic feedback. So to get a bit more in depth into this, what's actually happening when we're doing those slightly less stable loads during the pressing movements? Well, the first thing is we're just getting stronger. We're just doing pressing volume. Those muscles are getting stronger. Those motor units are getting stronger. We're becoming more coordinated. So if I'm doing any sort of overhead press, I'm going to be stronger, thus more stable. Second thing that's going to happen, you'll probably grow a little bit of muscle. That hypertrophy will help you. More of that biomechanical stacking makes you better and more stable in the overhead position. Now, what people will commonly talk about, and why the bottoms up variation or the waiter's press variation is going to be more beneficial for stabilizational exercises, is what we're really doing there is we're growing the pathway, or we're growing that map in our brain for how our shoulder reacts to the space around it. So if you imagine we're in a dark room and I have a torch, as I shine the torch around the room, I'll gradually get an idea for what's going on. And as I'm moving through space, my body is doing the exact same thing. It's relying on these afferent nerve signals coming back into my body or coming back into my brain, and it's learning where the shoulder sits in space as I do those movements. What essentially happens when we have a less stable load, like the bottoms up kettlebell press, is we shine the torch around a little bit more. So if I have a really stable load, like a dumbbell in my hand, and I press that dumbbell overhead, I'm moving through a very refined motor pattern. That motor pattern doesn't really change too much. And so the muscle contractions are almost identical going from rep to rep and set to set. When it's a less stable load, I have now these imposed demands coming from that kettlebell moving around, and I have to just utilize a small bit more muscle tissue. I'll have to contract in slightly different ways. And so I shine the torch around the room a little bit more, and I just get a better map for what's going on. To get even more in depth in this, when we look at the neural structures in our hands, in our legs, in our feet, the amount of nerve tissue we have there is what we're really looking to grow. And then understanding that those increased cross-sectional area of nerves will give me more information back to my brain, and then my brain will be able to transfer more information again and make me more stable with that. So if I was to do something like cut my forearm in half here, my dominant hand will probably have around 300% more neural tissue in it than my non-dominant hand will. What's happened here over years of writing and doing fine motor skills with this hand is I've increased that map in my brain, and I've actually increased the map in my arm as well. So it's a lot of neuromuscular stuff going on there. There's a host of other things happening as well. But to answer it very simply, I wouldn't think you would get the same out of the bottoms up bench press as you will from the bottoms up overhead press.
Bread banana, I think this probably highlights the thing that I wish more people would follow through on. And it's something we talked about a lot this year as well on 2025 is how useful your assistance exercises are for your ability to improve your strength or improve your weightlifting or improve stuff for the sport. Obviously, we're huge proponents of the bigger movements carrying a lot of the weight, but you can't catch everything and do it all with just those big movements. The assistance work in the right places makes a huge difference to a lot of different things if you get them right and if they're the things that are going to be useful for you in your scenario. So the use of assistance exercises, this is just one example of many where things are incredibly useful and can really, dare I say, be a game changer for certain things. You know what I was thinking recently is, so obviously science-based lifting is something that is becoming marketed.
Is a phrase that's been coarted into a load of different things.
But John, you were talking about neural tissue there, or like, you know, the bilateral transference or the contralateral effects, or all things sports scientists discovered with the help of physiologists and muscle physiologists and dissections and some great science. It's so unfortunate that the marketing tool of science-based lifting has taken off, because I even find myself someone who I think it's fair to say is scientifically literate.
Yes.
Who is classically trained in science, worked as an actual
professional scientist.
Worked as a professional scientist for a little bit, a lab monkey. But I even mind myself being like, oh, shut the fuck up with the studies. Like, when in a scenario otherwise, I probably might have learned something interesting.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, that is quite interesting. Because these are just little things you pick up over years. Like when you're this far into coaching and lifting, there's very few things where you go, back squats make you jump higher. You know, there or massive thing like more muscle can make you faster. Like things don't like that come along, but there's small things where you're like, oh, that is kind of interesting. Or if you're looking at something like, I don't know, intramuscular glycogen as opposed to liver storage or something like that. But I definitely find myself now being like, if I see someone give me a fucking PubMed ID somewhere, I'm like, can you just shut the fuck up? Like, did you
give me a break? Will you
give me a break? Unfairly so in some circumstances, I'm sure, but because of how it's gone, and it's instead of it being something where it's legitimate use of science, it's like, this is why I'm right and you can't refute this. But now I'm more on the opinion of, if someone is like, you know, I had 100 judo people and I don't know, the back squat was more useful than the power clean or something, I'm more likely to listen to that person now than I am to look into a PubMed reference, for example. Unfortunately as well, hypertrophy guys have really co-opted it. Like, it's not even sports science, it's just
that's what I was about to say.
Science-based muscle building.
Yeah.
Which, do you know what really gets me about that whole thing as well in that specific area is how little the differences they're actually making to muscle building when they talk about their different methods. Like they're talking about like a few percentage over a year or two. In those cases, they don't even have studies that long. But it's such a misleading topic where it's not like your vertical jump is going from 20 to 25 or something with a different training method. It's literally a few grams, a few 100 grams over a year of muscle.
Yeah.
If even in some cases, you know, not even in a lot of cases. It's just so misleading.
To make it out to be such a significant thing.
Yeah, it's not even that significant, you know.
I want to actually, on the point of science-based lifting, there's an Instagram page that I've started following in the last few months.
That's a great mustache.
Matt Endurance Scientist, Matt Carpenter, PhD researcher in endurance science and nutrition. Very interesting little clips on Instagram. If you're into endurance training or hybrid training or anything like that, I just thought it would be worth giving a shout out directly because he actually had some, like things Owen was mentioning there, a lot of the science-based lifting that's popping up now is marketing tools. And when you see someone like that just pulling up a paper being like, this is an interesting little thing, and talking about it, I enjoy that.
Like, unfortunately, there is nuggets that are there all the time, but they're definitely being missed now because most people using them are just talking about why their specific machine is better than something else.
Yeah.
Speaking of endurance, did a 650 calories last night in an hour, 118. That's like basically resting heart rate, like at
118
average heart rate for the hour. Isn't that crazy?
Look at you. That little left ventricular hypertrophy is working.
No, stop. There's no.
Now,
No.
stop it now.
That's reversing it. Bum, bum. Bum, bum.
Just good, strong, regular heartbeats.
That's what you want, isn't it? Big distance between them and really strong beats. No man said he just messed with the straps, but he's going to use them tomorrow. Don't.
Please don't.
This one's for you from Dan Martin.
Dan Martin says, hey lads, any thoughts on one hard set for back squats, specifically for in-season rugby? There may be another issue at play here, but after power cleans, I have about 2 or 3 back squat sets max in me. Could this work? Yes. Is it something I'm going to recommend? No, and there's 2 reasons for that. So when we look at an in-season training program, there's a few things we're really trying to achieve, right? We're looking for maintenance of muscle mass and maintenance of strength. We're looking for, ideally, developing more speed and more power. So usually that puts us into a certain brackets of sets, reps, and load. And then we need to make sure we're not damaging ourselves for the on-the-pitch sessions. We're doing probably 2 sessions on the pitch per week and then a game at the weekend for 2 or 3 weekends in a month. In this case, right, I get what you're talking about. You're saying 5 sets of 5 is going to absolutely, 5 by 5 at 75% is absolutely going to destroy me. Why can I not just do 1 set of 5 at 85%, maybe a little bit heavier on the load, maybe push myself a little bit harder? It shortens down the overall duration of our training session and my legs feel more fresh after it. The problem here is usually we don't say, I'm going to reduce the overall amount of training volume by reducing the amount of sets. What we usually say is, I'm going to go a little bit heavier and a little bit harder for 1 set. And that kind of negates the negative effects of doing less volume. Unfortunately, to do the 2 things we mentioned at the start, i.e. maintaining muscle mass, or ideally growing a little bit of muscle mass, and maintaining our strength numbers, there is a requisite amount of volume we have to do throughout the week. Due to the fact that we're in season, we're already reducing the total available volume to us. So we're probably only in the gym once or twice per week. So in this case, getting down to a single top set for your in-season training is not ideal. But you certainly don't have to be in the gym doing 6, 7, 8 sets of working sets in your back squat. But there is an amount of volume you have to do to kind of maintain the strength, maintain the hypertrophy. Also, if we're looking to develop the utmost power production potential and the utmost in terms of our speed potential, we have to be working with a certain level of stimulus and load on the barbell. And so if you're moving 90% really, really slowly, it's certainly not going to help you on the field. It might feel like you're getting a lot of work done. It might feel very productive, but using slightly lighter weights, moving the barbell more quickly will certainly be better for that.
Turkish, thanks for the answer. Small boy says you want to catch up. Did you do 193, was it? I think. Is that, am I right? Did I see a similar thumbnail? Did I remember the thumbnail right? The white dog?
You do have an incredible memory for people's thumbnail images.
I do. Sex said Glory Seeker Stan, love RTA. Fighter played Elden Ring. No. Small boy 300, possible. You might need to get a bit of body weight first, if I remember. Okay, David Thulis. Finally getting back to sport after my rehab next week. Have made myself listen to your podcast about going slow to set up training for this next year to try and avoid injury again. Yeah, definitely the biggest thing most people face when it comes to injuries is not necessarily not knowing what to do, but not being able to do the right things that they should be doing without re-injuring themselves. And, you know, irritating the injury, going back too fast, not doing the rehab for long enough. It's a no-brainer in so many different ways, but it's just the fallibility of being a human who wants to just do the things, you know? It's hard. I get it.
Yeah.
It's definitely tough, but you have to do this process. Merry Christmas, guys. Elliot Hooker. Any ideas on the 3-day per week program week live? Keen to get started new year. I couldn't give you an exact time frame. It's done, but we're making some big updates. They happen in January and February. So it's up to the developers if they can fit in the new programs. What we have to do is kind of release a big chunk of the new programs together so everyone can kind of be happy and ready to go.
Will Stone says, started on Combat Athlete 1 last week. Is the 2.0 program intended as an immediate next step after finishing the 10-week block? So yes, this is a question we commonly get, and it's probably an error in our nomenclature of the programs where we have block 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 or whatever. These programs are written to be run in sequence. So we do block 1 first, then block 2, then block 3, then block 4. Assuming our goals are staying the same, assuming we're staying with a similar period of training, you will do combat athlete 1, then combat athlete 2, then combat athlete 3. In terms of it being an immediate follow on, you could certainly take 5, 6, 7 days of rest. You could certainly take 2 weeks of kind of GPP phrase training in between, but you should be following from 1 onto 2, onto 3, and so on. The main thing to consider here is you never want to jump ahead. So you never want to start with block 2. You never want to go from block 1 to block 3. It should always be done in sequence due to the fact that these exercises, the progressions, the increase in volume, the increase in intensity, the increase in complexity of the movements themselves will be growing from block to block. And so what you're going to do in block 3 is very different from block 1. Fight Cade Fights says, a friend of mine is running RTA 2.0. He's a session away from maxing out. Could you drop Hassan a last minute pep talk and good luck? So best of luck, Hassan.
I'm trying to find
what I would really love to see, Hassan, is more people being more confident going into the last session. A major problem or major hiccup people have when they go for their max out session at the end of a long block like this is they've built up an expectation and they've built up a level of outcome in their head, and then they're worried they're not going to hit it. So if you're running RTA 2.0, it's 12 weeks long. You've done 24 sessions of 23 sessions of pretty difficult squats. And so now you have the expectation, and people oftentimes get nervous. They get nervous that they're not going to achieve what they want to achieve. They'll get nervous that the session is going to be too heavy. They'll get nervous that something will happen in their warm-up. They'll get nervous the barbell will feel too heavy on their back. What I want you to imagine and what I want you to visualize going into the session is that you have built up an unbelievable amount of momentum leading into this training session. All of the previous 23 sessions of squats are going to be laying in behind you. They're your cavalry running in behind you as you go through this training session. You've done all the hard work. The max out session at the end, don't put pressure on yourself. You know you've done all the training. You know you've achieved all you needed to achieve. This is just a small little visual representation about how much you've achieved, how much progress you've made over the last 3 months. So enjoy this session. Give yourself every possible opportunity to lift the best weights you possibly can. Don't fool around with anything silly the days before. Get good sleep, get good nutrition, and don't change anything. Don't change your warm-up. Don't suddenly go for a massage the day before if you don't usually get massage work done. Don't change anything with your nutrition or your stimulants or anything like that.
Peace said Santa can't squat 100 kilos. Should you kick him out? Yes. Reasonable goal today at the end of who's never done a snatch with 100 kilo clean, 200 kilo deadlift. 60 kilos would be nice. Maybe even 70, depending. Merry Christmas, lads. My split jerk suffers from cutting the lead extension short, but it doesn't happen on power jerks or push presses. But some likely issues: speed, timing. Half chicken, half egg. This is simply just you have bad technique and you need to practice more. There's certain things in weightlifting where sometimes you need to go do something. You need to do mobility, you need to do strength, you need to do a variation. Sometimes in weightlifting, you need to stop doing things. You need to stop doing that technical habit. You need to stop bending your arms. You need to stop the timing of your leg. And in this case, it's simply just doing the right thing. This is literally just practice. Like, never forget, I suppose, that the technical movements in weightlifting are just highly technical, highly skilled movements. And so practicing the right movement is the answer to this here. When you say cutting the lead extension short, I assume you're meaning how far out you've reached, because you said the lead leg. So it's just practice as many repetitions with a good quality split jerk as possible is the straight up answer here.
John?
I switched to lifting shoes about 9 months ago and still haven't been able to get my squat numbers back. Should I get back to squatting in socks or what, sticking with it? John, that's slightly unusual. So I would really like to see what the squat would look like. I couldn't. Yeah, that is unusual. Oh, actually, I bet I know what might be happening here. It's possible. Again, just not knowing, John, who you are, what your squat looks like. Your squat before, it could have been terrible. It could have been pretty high. And as a result, now you might have a deeper squat, might even be better quality, which in some cases it is or often is, but it's probably not enough time to catch up to that old number. So that's what I would imagine would be happening here. It's just very rare that someone would get into weightlifting shoes and their squat just isn't able to catch up. There's no real reason for that to happen. In fact, it should be better quality. So it could be, I think if you had honest looked at the depth of your squat, how deep you're squatting, and what it looked like, would probably be my best guess here without seeing it.
What I will say on that is when you go from flat-footed or barefoot squatting to parallel, that kind of classic low bar, very posterior dominant squat, and you suddenly get into ass to grass, really leg dominant, really knees forward, super vertical torso, those movements are as different from one another as the front squat is from the back squat. And possibly maybe even more different from each other. So like, obviously people always have this thing of, oh, I've squatted this weight in my head, and I know we're still calling them both back squats, but they're very, very different movements. And so I wouldn't necessarily be, if that is the case, right, as Owen described, where it's a very, very different looking squat, I wouldn't be overly worried about it being 9 months. It might take a little bit longer than that.
Right. Do you want to pick one or two?
Yeah. So
Slide, glide, ride says, what do you think of hand supported squat variations, for instance, Hatfield, Bulgarian split squats and normal squats, mainly using hypertrophy focus phase? So, one, we're just not a fan of them. Now, it's important to note that when we say we're not fans of things, it doesn't mean that we think anyone who uses them is a fucking idiot and you just have no idea about training. The way we go about implementing things, this just doesn't seem to make sense to me on the surface. I can't think of a reason where if you're using a squat variation, you want to start using your hands for support, which simply means you just have to add more weight to assume you're getting similar loading. Then you have to try and modulate the loading with your hands to assume that's consistent, and you have no real way of knowing that when you're using your hands, how much are you using them? So how much do you have to add weight? I know one of our friends was messing. He had a 220 kilo back squat, and he tried a Hatfield squat for a max the first time he did it, and he did 250, but he also really hurt his shoulder, which is a minor concern, but it could be set up with safety reasons. And if you had a spotter or a good setup, that's not an immediate concern. Although possible and notable is you rarely hurt your shoulders on squats. It is something that can happen on Hatfield variations. But that concern aside, I don't really see the benefit of doing something that is making it less precise, the loading you're putting on your legs. And then as a result of that, you're not able to get the same outcomes you think you want to get, or you're not able to be kind of consistent with the outcomes you're trying to get in training. When we know, for example, how we implement squatting, we know pretty consistently what should happen and what change in performance we should see for sport when you're doing something like a regular back squat. To me, when you're doing something like a Hatfield squat here, you're adding in more variables that I don't think really make sense. There's just no real way of modulating how much your arms are working. And if you're doing a lower body exercise, then I don't particularly see how this is beneficial. Now, if you're using this for power output, which I think is what a certain amount of people are using it for, I'm somewhat agnostic to it. I could see why you might make the argument that you can move certain heavy weights pretty fast. But again, if your idea is that you're moving heavyweight fast, it's specifically for the lower body. So while you could move heavier weights faster, you're distributing the load across. So I'd be willing, I'd open the doors if someone did an interesting study, for example, or someone had a ton of athletes and they were like, look, I've done this with 100 different sprinters or football players. And for some reason that I can't pin down yet, every time they do it, their 40-yard dash is 0.2 faster in 2 weeks. I'd be certainly willing to open the doors to that. But as of right now, I certainly can't see a good reason for that. Now, if it comes to something like hypertrophy, what I could actually see possibly being useful here is that if you're really in hypertrophy phase and you can tolerate the fatigue and the short-term changes to your output from going to failure and even beyond failure, is starting with regular squats and then going to near failure and then getting a couple more reps with the hand-assisted squat. I could see that being quite interesting, and it would definitely take your quads and whatever style you're doing, or your split squat further. So in terms of hypertrophy focus phase, I could see a combination possibly being a good idea, because then you could ensure that your technique is more consistent. You can ensure that you're staying more upright. You can ensure that you're keeping the load on your legs a little bit better. So in the specific cases for hypertrophy, I could see that being the case. Like when it comes to hypertrophy, it's outcome based on kind of whatever gets you there. And there's a couple of different ways of getting things. Whereas when it comes to being stronger, or when it comes to, well, being stronger and bigger, or being bigger and faster, or being stronger and faster, there's kind of more defined channels which we would go down and trying to do that. And there's certain ways we go about doing that, which are probably very aware to a lot of people if you've watched this for long enough. But if it's just hypertrophy and you're not worried about the short-term impact to your speed or your other lifts later in the week, I could see a scenario where you do like a set of 8, you're nearly to failure, you are using a safety squat bar, you reach out, you've set up, and you do an extra 4 or 5 reps maybe. I could see that being quite interesting if you want to take things to the absolute max in that case. But in general, for the sporting application, I think it's, what's a nice way? It's not really, it doesn't really make sense. I think you're adding another variable that doesn't need to be there. And to be honest, it's not like it's not obvious that you need to lift heavy, have good body comp, do your conditioning, sprint faster. I know it's not obvious to some coaches, but there's lots of people out there who know that that's the answer. So there's nothing really that needs to be reinvented here per se. Again, I'm open to the fact that if someone was like, no, that this, I see this all the time, and they're a good coach, and I have respect for them, I'm very interested to see if they have enough a sample group, or they just see it consistently enough. They were like, look, I've been doing this for 5 years and there's something going on there. But as of right now, look at it from the way we train people, I just don't see it being useful for sport. But again, maybe for hypertrophy could be useful.
Yeah, a bit of extra volume.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have any extra ones.
Guys, I hope you all have a great Christmas. I hope you get some good training. And to everyone who entered the squat competition, once again, thanks very much. Love to see it. Obviously, we get to see people making progress all the time. We're in contact with people all the time. But there's something nice about a group of people running through the training program at the same point. They're coming across the same challenges, and so many people making massive PB. So well done on the training.
Oh, actually, so there's probably 1 or 2 more there. So one of them is, if you had a girl in her 20s wanting to start going to the gym with no prior experience, how would you set up to have a good introduction?
My number one thing on this is you have to find something that the person wants to do and enjoys doing. So in this case, I've been asked this 150 times in the last year. My boyfriend, my girlfriend, my mom, my dad want to start going to the gym. What should I get them to do? And you really just need to get them to do a number of different training modalities. Introduce them to them. That might be a bike row ski class. That might be a CrossFit class. That might be going and training with a group of powerlifters you're all friends with. Basically, just get them into the environment, figure out if they enjoy doing it. It should be something that is the best hour of your day, and not something where you're like, oh, I have to go to the gym now this evening. There is so many different training modalities out there that are really enjoyable. And it's horses for courses. Everybody's going to like something slightly different from the next person. So just try things, bring them to different places. If there's something that you really enjoy doing, bring them along with you. But I would just say find something that's really enjoyable and then go from there.
Jamie, just to answer your question about the Ironman, 2 or 3 days a week, because you've run it before, would work perfectly. Just answer your question quickly. Okay, last one. So, hey lads, I do some strength coaching of a youth softball team, age 12 to 15. I see lots of knee pain among them, usually before we've even begun the first session. Is this typical? Any advice? I'm very conservative to work around the problems they have. I also recommend seeing physio and physician. So yes, this isn't typical in some ways. You can often see, so you didn't specify if they're male or female, but you do see this quite a bit in young males, especially when they're growing. Sometimes they have like Osgood Schlatters in their knee, which if you just leave it alone and don't irritate it, would generally go away. The recommendation for Osgood Schlatters is just don't irritate it, and it's seen that be quite successful, is just don't do the things that make it worse. But what you often see as well is that usually around that age, the teenagers start to lose their default mobility and they start to get a lot tighter. They start sitting a lot more. They're in school for longer. They're probably in their desk for longer. They're probably like this for most of the day now, sitting on their phone. They're probably sitting a lot, traveling to and from school. They're sitting with their friends. And so what you often see is things like hip flexors get really tight. Don't have ankle mobility. So usually in those cases, soft tissue work and mobility is your best bet. So what I would be starting with here in these sessions, not only for a great ground for future progress for these athletes in their 20s, is to build a capacity now, and the better mobility you have when you're younger, the more likely you'll be able to keep it for longer. Is, I would, to be honest, if you're seeing such a high incidence among them, I'd be starting with mobility and soft tissue work on the quads, hamstrings, calves, get them rolling their quads with a barbell, get them doing every session, get into VMO, up along the quad, outside the quad, vas lateralis, all that good stuff, and make that the most of the session. And you should see, I would suspect, some of that knee pain reducing, because a lot of times in younger athletes like that, it's often just lack of mobility, and then they're trying to do explosive movements. You know, if they're softball, they're probably sprinting quickly. They're trying to get strength training. They're not able to maintain good positions. It's shocking how many teenage athletes like that can squat below parallel without some absolutely disgusting positions. And I'd say your main job here is probably to get mobility first, suppleness of tissue going, and I'll go to bat with anyone on that, especially this age group. That would be probably your best bet. And then strength training allowing, you try and obviously progress what you can progress. And this might take 3 months, and not everyone might do it because they mightn't progress and they mightn't do what they need to do, but you just have to do your best with them and show them the way and the homework to do. And I would suspect you would see progress there.
Yeah, I coach an under-14s team at the moment for a bit of an off season, just doing S&C with them once per week. Tight quads are incredibly common. Tight quads are also incredibly common in the senior athletes we have all the time. As Owen said, you're sitting all the time. Couch stretch, as much mobility as you can get them to do, and then make it a habit. So every warm-up should be the same. If you have pain points within the squad or within the team, your warm-up should address that. Your cool-down should address that. And it just becomes part of that training that they do all the time. If they have tight quads, they go and do a couch stretch. If they have tight hamstrings, they're going to do this. They know how long they're going to do it for, because you're going to do it multiple times per week with them.
Okay, thanks, guys. We'll go watch part 1 of the deadlift series. And today's the 24th. So we'll probably see you next week for another live stream before the new year. And have a great Christmas. Part 2 of the deadlift will be out later this week, depending on how Jacob can edit it, our supreme editor who spends hours doing. I had to edit that squat video, and I can't tell you how annoyed I got. I actually was like, so many things have changed in Premiere Pro, and it just wasn't working.
Oh no!
I was just so irritated.
People who make software platforms need to stop changing things.
Yeah, I know, but people who like doing it then don't care.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.